Hello, Donovan. Good afternoon. So we're not in, yeah, not in presentation. Oh, there we go. Thank you very much. Sure here. So let's begin. We have a very exciting program for everyone today. Thanks first, everyone, for joining this Thursday afternoon or morning or evening session of the Methane Roadmap Action Program, depending on where you are in the world. My name is Nathan Borgford Parnell, but I go by BP, so I respond to any of those names, but BP is my preference. It's a little less of a mouthful. I lead the science fairs program here at the Climate and Clean Air Coalition. We're off of the presentation mode. But I lead, as I said, the Science Affairs program here at the CCAC, and along with my partner, Sophie Bernard, co-manage the Methane Roadmap Action Program. Within the Methane Action Program, we have a series of webinars. This is the third such webinar in the current series, the one that you're attending here today. Focused on opportunities for NDC enhancement for the 3.0 NDCs that countries are developing right now for publication next year. This is the waste methane focused webinar. The preceding two webinars were focused on oil and gas and the agricultural sector. I will be providing some background and context for this webinar and our work in the CCAC broadly on NDC enhancement, and I will then pass over to my esteemed colleague Donovan Story, who is our waste sector expert and runs our waste hub at the CCAC, to speak more specifically about the waste sector and opportunities for NDC enhancement. And then we are joined by Mr. Yusuf Moyad Yusuf, an expert from Iraq, one of our champion country partners in the CCAC, who will be discussing Iraq's experience addressing waste sector methane in their NDC. And then we will have time for Q&A at the end. So thank you, Drew. Next slide. So just a little bit of background to start us off. The Global Methane Pledge, launched in 2020, was the first ever major global commitment to address specifically emissions of anthropogenic methane within the context of the UNFCCC's broader objectives on climate stabilization, but with a specific intent to bring down global methane emissions to levels that are consistent with our 1.5 objectives. We're off of the presentation mode again. The specific target of the GMP is, for the 150 countries that have joined to date, is to collectively work together to reduce global methane emissions by at least 30% below 2020 levels by the end of this decade. The reason that this target is set is, one, that it is consistent with our 1.5 levels of ambition, but it's also absolutely achievable. It's achievable, and we know that because of the global methane assessment that the CCAC published in 2020, which found that we could well surpass those mitigation targets if the whole world really focused in on the technically available and economically available mitigation options that are present in all of the three main anthropogenic sectors. In support of this ambition set within the Global Methane Pledge, the CCAC it provides secretariat services for global methane pledge countries, and we created as an onboarding process and a capacity building process this Methane Roadmap Action Program to support, in particular, new countries that are unfamiliar with the way our operations in the CCAC, but also for longstanding CCAC partners, to help them really grapple with what their existing commitments and level of data and knowledge really is related to methane action in their own countries, and then communicate that in ways within action plans, which can be quickly translated into financeable projects and targeted action. And so that is the purpose of the Methane Roadmap Action Program originally. Thank you for the next slide here. As part of the Methane Roadmap Action Program, it has a number of elements. One of those elements is these webinar series. We had 3 webinar series last year, and the webinar series that we have this year are focused primarily on this NDC enhancement opportunity that every country is looking to is engaged with right now. The purpose of these methane roadmaps that I was previously articulating was not to create an additional reporting structure or planning structure in national governments. The purpose was to facilitate and help countries really understand what was in their existing planning and mitigation commitments, which will impact or either directly or indirectly methane emissions, communicate that in a transparent way, but in a way that fully is consistent with and supportive of existing planning and reporting requirements in the UNFCCC and in other multilateral agreements. So we are not in the business of making anybody's lives harder by adding more work, hopefully. The intention with this process is to make your lives easier for those countries here on the line here today who are interested in engaging with this process. So next slide. So methane in the nationally determined contributions and biennial transparency reports. So many countries to date include methane in a number of different ways in their NDCs. There's a growing number of NDCs that include methane as part of their economy-wide target, but a much smaller cohort of countries that include within their commitments and in the reporting that they do on progress towards those commitments, which the reporting is now done through this BTR process. A much fewer of the countries in that cohort are actually providing a higher level of transparent information about what they plan to do or what they're committing to do in terms of concrete activities or policies and strategies at a sector or subsectoral level or individual activity or measure level. It's really quite critical at this stage in the process that countries begin providing additional information in their NDCs and in their BTRs, which are transparent and allow for a greater level of tracking and focus on methane. This is critical in large part because financing institutions, multilateral development banks, aid agencies, and bilateral aid and development aid entities are looking to these documents as guidance for and to understand levels of political engagement, political will, and buy-in and commitment to these mitigation targets that are set. They are looking to these documents to provide justification to move resources to support additional action. So if in your NDCs, you have an ambition to reduce methane in particular from the waste sector, from across the entire waste chain, but it is not included in the text in a way that's transparent and communicated in a way that could be used to leverage finance. You're really doing yourself a disservice from a country perspective. It's actually it will make it difficult to shine a light on this issue and bring the kind of financial and human resources needed to meet the challenge today. Next slide. So the CCAC, in addition to the MRAP program that we've established, is the first point of call for GNP countries. In addition to this capacity building support that we provide through MRAP, we have other resources available to countries. We have expert technical assistance programs where we can provide small-scale funding for countries to address critical gaps in planning and data management, financial analysis, project planning, and capacity building and support. We provide support across all of these different lines of work. So policy, technical assistance, as I just mentioned, national planning support, mitigation action support, and in addition to that, we have 6 sectoral hubs where our partners come together to develop communities of practice, to generate new ideas for action and support for action in the critical sectors that are the largest emitters of short-lived climate pollutants. And in the case of methane, those sectors are agriculture, fossil fuels, and waste. So Donovan, who will be speaking next, leads the Waste Hub and that community of practice. Next slide. We have a number of technical tools and resources available to countries as well. This slide lists a number of them. I will say for MRAP specifically in the national planning process, we have templates and workbooks available for countries to want to work through the national planning process for methane. They have elements for each of the specific sectors, and they cover all of the components of our national planning process. Those are all available in our technical assistance portal. I already mentioned that we have expert consultation services, and we have resources available to countries to support expert consultations. We do national planning support over a longer term time frame, and policy and regulatory and implementation support. And there's a link here at the bottom, but we'll provide a link at the end of these slides for this technical assistance portal as well. Next slide. So just very quickly, I mentioned the focus of MRAP this year is on the NDC 3.0. Why is that? So under the Paris Agreement, parties to the Paris Agreement of the UNFCCC have agreed every 5 years to publish, to develop and publish transparently a new, more ambitious, hopefully 1.5 consistent level of nationally determined mitigation ambition. What is your individual country capable of committing to in terms of mitigation, both based on internal resources and what are the in many cases the potentials for additional mitigation if outside resources become available to support it. The current NDCs that have been now framed by the UNFCCC, the NDC 2.0, have a mitigation target set to 2030 at the end of this decade. The next NDCs which should be published next year in advance of COP30 are set to 2035. This is the last opportunity that we have within this decade to make sure that our collective ambition to reduce methane in particular, that's the topic here today, but to reduce all greenhouse gases in ways that are consistent with our 1.5 levels of ambition. This is the last opportunity we have to establish those high levels of ambition and within this decade. The NDC 4.0 will be published in 2030. So within the frame of the Global Methane Pledge, which has a 2030 target, this is really the opportunity. This is the moment when we really need to take a hard look at what we all can do on methane, what are the benefits, impacts, the costs of those measures, and how to mobilize the resources necessary to meet the need. And so thank you. Next slide. I'm talking over long. It's a long-standing problem of mine. So why don't we jump past this slide? Oh, no, go back to the bar graph, sorry. So just to hit home one additional element here about the context of where we're operating. Without additional effort to address methane emissions, the expectation is that methane emissions will continue to rise and not decrease. And that will be catastrophic for all of our climate and likely many of our sustainable development ambitions, particularly within this decade. Our expectation is that almost every sector will see emissions rise, except for coal. The expectation is that emissions from the coal sector will decrease, but methane emissions from gas, livestock, and from solid waste in particular are expected to rise quite significantly in this decade without additional action. Wastewater as well is expected to increase, as is coal. And we expect those emissions to increase in every sector. And that's the bar graph here on the right. The largest increases are expected in Asia and Middle East and Africa, but every part of the world is looking to have their methane emissions increase absent additional focused action. And the profiles of every country or every region are different based on the type of production. As you see, agriculture is expected to increase in Asia, Latin America, and the Middle East and Africa, less so much in former Soviet Union countries and OECD countries. So there is a mix from country to country and region to region, but it's worth pointing out that waste is a major problem in almost every region, as is fossil fuels. And so none of these sectors can be ignored, but certainly waste is a major contributor all over the world and a major target and opportunity when it comes to changing the trajectory of methane emissions in a way that's consistent with our ambition. Next slide. One more slide. So it's not all bad news. I mean, there are enormous opportunities available when it comes to the benefits that could accrue from mitigating methane in all of the sectors. That is because methane is not only a short-lived climate pollutant, but it contributes to the formation of tropospheric ozone, which is a greenhouse gas in its own right, but it's also a powerful air pollutant. If we can reduce methane in the near term, we can deliver about a quarter of a degree of avoided warming by the middle point of this century, while also providing substantial additional public health benefits, agricultural benefits, and labor benefits by reducing people's exposure to ozone and reducing instances of heat waves and other climatic events expected to be caused by increased warming. We have assessed within the CCAC and among our partners that the available and existing technological and economically possible measures available to us today in all three main sectors for methane, if every country works diligently within this decade to apply them as far as they can within their own internal capabilities and capacities, that we can not only reduce methane emissions to levels that are consistent with our 1.5 levels of ambition, but we can deliver collectively that near-term climate benefit and all of those public health benefits, agricultural benefits, and labor benefits across the board. That is a very good news story. The trick is we have to get it done. We have to figure out how to mobilize those resources, and that is the purpose of this session here today. So next slide. Part of that problem, part of the issue is unlocking necessary finance. I'm not going to linger too long on this slide, but you'll see the bar graph on the right here is an assessed actual need of costs to implement all of the methane measures that we've assessed in the global methane assessment. The estimated cost, this is from last year, was just under 120 billion US dollars. But the annual cost or the annual amount of money that is flowing from public finance right now or as of last year is well below the mark necessary to achieve that. These numbers absolutely have to increase if we are going to meet our ambition. One of the ways that we ensure that those numbers increase is by being transparent and being really explicit in our commitments, in our targets, so that we can point to those and use that to leverage additional finance and put more focus on this issue. So next slide. This slide represents what's currently in the NDCs in terms of transparent information that could be used to catalyze additional financing and action. So if you look at the bottom right or the bottom left, apologies, as I mentioned, a great number of countries already include methane in their overall economy-wide targets. In this case, it's just under 90% currently. We'd love to see 100%. But the real trick and what we're really focusing on here today and in our guidance generally on the NDCs is what's happening in those three left columns. Those are the percentage of NDCs that include additional information, either at a sectoral, a subsectoral, or an individual action level, which describes activities, commitments, and costs and benefits of actions in particular sectors. And you see in the waste sector, about 50% of countries right now are including some level of additional information about their ambition and the actions they're going to take within their economy-wide target in the waste sector. That's better than all of the other sectors, but still insufficient. We'd like to see that number come up significantly. And even for the countries that are already including this kind of information in one way or another in their NDCs, there's always room for improvement and expanding to enhance our ambition. Next slide. I'm already over long here, so why don't we skip this slide? So big picture here, and then I'm going to hand it over to Donovan to get into more in the details of the waste sector NDC opportunities. Every country, and we want to be very explicit about this, the commitment that every country has made within the Paris Agreement is, in the first instance, to establish an economy-wide target, or as close to an economy-wide mitigation target as possible. That target should include all of the Kyoto basket of greenhouse gases. Methane is a Kyoto basket greenhouse gas and should be part of that target. If it's not, we encourage countries and support them to include it. But as I mentioned, over 90% already do. But the trick then is to go beyond that and increase the level of transparency and specificity about what goes into that methane component of the economy-wide target. And just to spotlight one of our partner countries, there are a great many champion countries in the CCAC and beyond that do provide substantial additional information and transparency around their economy-wide target. Cote d'Ivoire is one of the good examples of a country that provides more information for us to work with for their economy-wide target. So they not only include methane in their economy-wide target, but they include specific measures to reduce methane at a sectoral level and subsectoral level. They also quantify specifically some of the benefits specifically related to public health benefits from co-reduced air pollution that will accrue because of mitigation that is undertaken for climate objectives. Next slide, please. So these are the best practices that we aimed for in the economy-wide target and in all NDCs. I'm not going to go into this in detail because Donovan is going to be talking in a little bit more detail about the waste sector opportunities. But what he talks about in the waste sector is something that we help countries reflect in all of the other sectors, particularly under MRAP for the methane emitting sectors, but within the CCAC more broadly, we support countries to be fully comprehensive in both air quality and climate planning, not just in short-lived climate pollutants, not just in methane. So all of the greenhouse gases and air pollutants, we help countries be transparent and really understand the benefits and costs and the levels of ambition that they can achieve when they take a comprehensive look at their full economy-wide targets and the air quality benefits in particular that could accrue from mitigation. Next slide. All right, excellent. I'm only 6 minutes over. That's pretty good for me, for those of you who know me. Brevity is not normally one of my strengths. So I am very happy to now hand over the microphone to my colleague, Donovan Story, who is our waste sector expert and the coordinator of the Waste Hub in the CCAC. Donovan, the floor is yours.
Thank you, BP. Very comprehensive. So a great start to the session, I think. Okay, so my name's Donovan Story. I'm the waste expert at CCAC, and I support our state parties and also our non-state parties as well as in terms of their waste SLCPs, as BP has talked about. And today I want to really focus more on the opportunities which exist in the current but also the forthcoming NDC process for waste. And as BP said, there's a number of really large challenges facing the waste sector in terms of its emission reduction, but also there are a lot of good news stories and a lot of great examples to work from as well. So I'll be covering those in the next few minutes before we pass off to our colleague from Iraq. So next slide, thanks, Jahir. The waste sector is a really important source of anthropogenic methane emissions, as we can see, some 20%. It's very significant and it's growing. We know that we face a waste crisis currently in terms of some 2.4 billion tonnes, but this is set to almost double in terms of volume by 2050. So we know the challenge. We know that what we're doing at the moment in the waste sector is not working on a scale that it needs to work upon. And there are very significant consequences in terms of greenhouse gases as a result of that failure. But we also can project and know that the volume of waste that we are going to be dealing with in the next 2 to 3 decades is going to be significantly larger. And so there is a sense of urgency in which to focus on waste issues as a part of the broader GHG emissions work that we do. We also can see from this diagram, there are a set of linked crises around the waste sector and how it is functioning or not functioning in many countries. In particular, we know that around 30% of food waste ends up as organic waste in landfills, which is a huge loss of, obviously, opportunity in terms of capturing food loss and diverting it from landfills. But we also know that around 40% of waste is openly burned globally because of poor waste collection and management systems, which is leading to a significant problem of air quality and black carbon as a result. So there are consequences beyond just waste itself from waste management systems that are not at the standard that we need them to be at in terms of both greenhouse gas emissions, but also broader health and air quality challenges as well. Next slide, Jerry. So some of that is captured in that diagram preceding, but we know that around 70% of the world's waste continues to end up in dumps and landfills, which is way too high as a proportion, and in some countries that is almost 90%. And landfills themselves are 11% source of global anthropogenic methane emissions, which again, that number is far too high. And we have relatively low and stubbornly low recycling and circular economy levels of between around 10 and 15%, which we must seriously address to be able to particularly divert waste from landfills and obviously organic waste from landfills in order to meet a lot of the methane emission targets which are set as a part of the SLCP contribution to greenhouse gas emission reductions. And we also have talked about the crisis in open burning, and there are some good news stories there, particularly in Africa, with its recent ministerial conference ambition to end open burning on the African continent of waste by the year 2040. So there are a lot of good news stories as well about addressing some of the problems with waste management systems, which I think we should also focus on. Cheerio, the next slide, thanks. At CCAC and along with many of our partners, we really promote what we refer to as low methane pathways. That is that the known actions that we can take to be able to mitigate SLCPs and particularly methane emissions from the waste sector. And a lot of that is related by understanding the relationship of waste across the whole value chain, particularly at the point of collection through the lack of source separation, which we can address. Unless we separate materials, it becomes very difficult to work with them and valorize them, and to be able to create economies around waste, in particular supporting the circular economy. So separation close to source or at source as possible, reducing the impacts or the volumes of food loss and waste in the waste system is also very important. And then, of course, through the treatment and diversion process, focusing on composting, black soldier fly technologies, recycling, and so on. Having material resource facilities either prior to landfills or at landfill sites to be able to work with separated materials, but also the management of landfills through potentially biocovers, for example, landfill gas capture, and also avoided methane emissions by taking as much organic waste out of the waste management system as possible. These are all critical challenges, but they're also opportunities. And we really, the waste system is very complex, but we do at least know what we need to do. It's putting, as BP has pointed out, it's putting the right resources and finance in place to be able to support the transition that we all know that is necessary. Next slide, thanks. So I'll just briefly touch upon this because I think it's been covered above, but these are the opportunities, particularly in solid waste management and wastewater treatment. And the main point to highlight here really is that particularly through supporting circular economies, and we'll finish off with a couple of slides in which countries have identified circular economies as being their primary strategy in terms of emissions reductions, that the cost is not that great. And there are a lot of things which we put into place, a lot of strategies and investments and technologies that can be put into place in which there is quite strong cost recovery opportunities. And I would also add a lot of strong employment opportunities and small business opportunities. I think black soldier fly, for example, in the African continent is an example of that. But there are also a lot of opportunities for scaling up of composting, to be able to displace or work with chemical fertilizers for agriculture as well. So we know that there are investments that need to be made and actions that need to be taken, and infrastructure, particularly away from landfills, that need to be put into place through material resource facilities and so on. But we do know that they do have a potential income opportunity, that they can generate economies, that they can valorize waste. So it is not a lost investment, if you like. It is not a cost, it is an investment. Sorry to put it that way. Next slide, Jerry. I want to focus on a couple of final slides on good practices, just to indicate where countries are going with their NDCs and waste. As BP pointed out, around half of countries now are recognising waste through their NDCs, and we expect that in the NDC 3.0 process, the 2025 round, we'll see this increase quite significantly given the understanding of the consequence of waste and waste systems to emissions. And we do have great examples that are based on target setting, for example, Nigeria and Guatemala, either as a percentage target setting or as a volume target setting. We also can see very good practices in terms of waste and NDCs from places such as Albania, which has put a target around composted waste. So that includes diversion, composting, valorization, and business development. And I think that this is a great strategy in terms of thinking about the use of organic waste. And I think we can see examples from the UAE, which is quite similar, which is around diversion from landfills, having seen the proportion of methane emissions which come from landfills and the problem of organic waste and waste management systems, that this diversion rate again is a very useful strategy. And then we see complete prohibition regulations as well, such as in the EU and Norway being an example of that, of forcing the valorization and the circular economy around organic waste in particular by simply banning it from landfills and encouraging investment in infrastructure to deal with organic waste streams. Next slide. And an example of Cameroon, a deep dive into a particular country before we move to Iraq, we can see similar kinds of challenges in Cameroon. So around 12% of emissions come from the waste sector, but we see also really clear and ambitious goals. In particular, the support that cities should have developed or controlled landfills with 70% methane emission abatement or capture with the mitigation actions. And we can see some examples, I think, through Cameroon, which really show specific actions and investments, and their NDC, the Cameroon NDC, for example, when it discusses waste, really puts very clear investment opportunities for donors and also using public funds as well. It puts basically a financial figure against the mitigation actions, which I think is very, very useful because it gets into the detail of negotiating investments, either OPEX or CAPEX, in changing waste management systems in Cameroon. We can see in the Cameroonian NDC, for example, a very strong emphasis on supporting circular economy principles and investments of focusing on biogas and landfill gas from solid waste, by also focusing on recovery, but the valorization of organic waste in particular for the use of agriculture and forestry projects, and a very strong and positive link between the two sectors, waste and agriculture, and also a very strong emphasis on composting and business opportunities. Black soldier fly included a number of other countries as well in terms of valorization of organic waste. So there are some really positive examples, and I think good news stories about how waste is entering into the NDC process, which other countries can learn from, which I think the private sector and other international organizations can recognize and support, and looking forward to also hearing more from the example of Iraq next. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Donovan. That was fantastic. So let's just move right along. I will pass it over to our country expert, Mr. Yusuf Moyad Yusuf, who's the Director of Climate Change Directorate in Iraq. Sir, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you, really. Thank you for inviting me for participating in this important event and the first creating from the bone. I attend this SBI conference. Of course, we have the many negotiation issue about the methane, and it's harmonized with the subject of the event. Really, please, next slide. When we're talking about, yes, next slide, please. When we're talking about the methane and when we focus about this important issue, of course, we continue and we will add that this is the important issue with the documents and the plan deal with this, the climate change in Iraq. For that, this is the national laws, measure legislation, and the plan strategies. is the deal with the climate change. Focus about this is the methane in the oil and gas and agriculture, of course, also in the waste management. For that, already the Iraq is accession to Paris Agreement, Iraq member of the Paris Agreement, also the NDC Iraq included many chapters focus about the methane emission, how can reduction of the methane emission from the oil and gas and the municipalities sectors in Iraq. Also now we continue for prepare, this is the many document, maybe during the next 2 or 3 months, the Iraq the Iraq will announce about the NAMA document. This is the document will include, this is the many project deal with the reduction of the methane from the waste management. We will prepare this project with the Ministry of Municipalities and Mayoralty of Baghdad. Also, Iraq is a member of the Methane Pledge and the NDC partnership. Also, now we're working in the Directorate of the climate change with our colleague in the Chemicals Management Department about this is the align with the other conventions, especially about this is the Stockholm BOPS conventions deal with about the emissions from the waste management. Next slide, please. For that, we have this is the many bilateral project. To be honest, when we're talking about the reduction of methane from the waste management in Iraq, we're talking about this is a new concept and the climate action in Iraq. For that, we have this is the many, we can say the bilateral project, but we're interested for a scale up of the project. The first project we implementing it with the USAID in Iraq. We will focus on this project about landfills in Iraq and the capture of methane from the landfill in Iraq. We organizes the many training and capacity building for the related staff and the related ministries in the Baghdad and the provinces about that. Also, we focus about the evaluation about this is the landfills. How can the development this is landfill for capture of the methane. Not only methane, also about this is the greenhouse gases issue. We focus about the three sites in the Al Mosul, Basra, and Baghdad, and we focus about the capacity building of the staff in these three provinces about deal with reduction of methane in the landfill. Next slide, please. About this is the ongoing methane waste project. We have the three projects, two projects with the CCAC and the project implementing by the National Investment Commission. Next slide, please. Now we continue for implementing the waste management project funded by CCAC, implementing by the technical team from the Ministry of Environment and related ministries. All national stakeholders participate in implementing the project. Also, we have this is the company or local organization selected by the CCAC for submitted the technical and technical advice to technical team. We will focus in this project about this is the update waste emission inventory. Especially now we have this the final draft of the second communication in Iraq. This is the second communication included the inventory about this about the methane. For that, we need some review about this inventory and focus about the inventory and the waste emission. Also, we will focus about implementing the LCB mitigation options. Also, we will focus about this is the analysis about the current waste laws and policy and what we need legislation for implementing this our national plan. This is the important issue about that. We will try our best for completing the project according to the timetable of it. We will depend on this is the outputs of a project when we start for update NDC Iraq. This is the project or outputs of the project very important for us for prepare the vision of the Iraqi and then next NDC about reduction methane from the waste and from the waste management sector. Second, please. Next slide. Also, now we focus about this the important issue about this is the engagement, the private sector in the climate action in Iraq. For that, this is the National Investment Commission in Iraq. Announced about this is the important project. This is the NIC. Announced about this is the project to private sector and international company, international investor for implementing this project. This is the project we will focus about the reduce the waste sent to landfills, and we focus about the generation of the electricity from this is the renewable issue. This is the project or the concept of this project is the first time implementing in Iraq. Of course, when we will focus about mitigation methane emission in this project. Also, we have this important issue. How can this Iraq prepare? This is the and the capture or reduction of the methane. How can Iraq the access to carbon market by this is the project. And we wait. This is the law and administration procedure from NIC for complete everything and start for implementing this project. Next slide, please. Also, we have this is the project, also the CCAC about this the regional project, and this is the focus about development regional road maps about Iraq for the reduction the waste burning. This is the one. This is the important issue in Iraq, and we have this autobus alpha project will support us with the capacity building for how can prepare this our priorities in this important issue for the reduction of urine in the landfill and the waste management in Iraq. Next, please. Okay, now we continue for focus about this, the methane, one of the important priorities. Especially our colleague in the Ministry of Oil now achieve important progress about the reduction the methane in the oil and gas sector. For that, the second priority is now and for reduction of the methane in the waste management waste management sector. For that, we have some priorities about that. We wait this the project, complete the project. We continue implemented it. I mentioned that when we start the update in the NDC Iraq, we have this. We will have the clear vision about how about the reduction of methane and the greenhouse gases from the waste sector. This is the first time we have the clear vision about that, and we focus about that. We will start directly after the COP29 in the Baku. We will start for update on NDC, and we interested for increase our ambitions for reduction of greenhouse gases. And one of this important pillar, we will focus about the reduction and the increase Iraqi emission ambitions. Sorry, about the reduction emission. We will focus about the reduction methane in the oil, in the waste management. Also now we continue for prepare, this is the important document in Iraq. This first document, the investment climate plan, also with the NIC, with the National Investment Commission. Also we have the chapter, include the chapter about the reduction of methane and waste management. This is an important document for more engagement the private sector and international investor in Iraq for more implementing in the Iraq commitment in the Paris Agreement. Also, we continue with the UNDP for prepare the green growth document. Also, we have this the sector deal with the reduction of the greenhouse gases from the waste management. This is our vision. Really, we interested and we have the optimistic for we implementing this the many project and increase our ambitions of the climate, our commitment to the climate change and the next NDC. This is my presentation. I am sorry for maybe have a in here. I have the noisy. I sorry if my sound. I hope it's clear. And again, thank you to CCAC for inviting me for submitted. This is the Iraq vision for reduction, the methane and the waste sector. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That was really informative. So now we are moving to the next portion of the session, which is questions and answers. We will allow everyone to use their microphones. At this point, I ask anyone who has a question, please use the hand raising function and I will call on you. But as we are doing that, Yusuf, I have a quick question. It was very exciting what you just said at the end about the investment climate plan that you developed with UNDP. Is that the plan that you've just published? Is that out in public now?
Yes. No, we have zero draft. We continue for our national stakeholders for complete it. Our plan, we announce officially on it in the COP29 in the Iraqi pavilion.
Oh, fantastic. All right. Well, that's another reason to go to Baku, I think, to go to that event.
Yes, of course. I will send invitation to CCAC for attend. This is the side event.
Fantastic. Thank you. So we have one hand raised now from Valentin. Floor is yours. Please introduce yourself and who you're directing your question to, please. Are you able to? Are you able to use your mic? You should be able to unmute yourself. Is that see the next person on the list? Piotr. Oh, Valentin. All right, you seem to be off of mute.
Good afternoon, everyone. Are you getting me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you so much for giving me the floor. I am Valentin Wagnoun from Cameroon, and I was very delighted when the presenter shows the case of Cameroon. I would like to say one thing. Waste sector is among the priority sector of our NDC. But the critical issue is now how to move beyond intentions to implementation. And another question is about how to reduce waste sent to landfill and open dumping. Because mostly in my country, you have many sites of open dumping, and always those open sites are burned. And that burning provides a lot of black carbons in the atmosphere. I would like to have some guideline on how to engage national government into the process of reducing waste sent to landfill and open dumping. And then the government of Cameroon has made significant efforts this year to address the issue of circular economy. And we are currently implementing what we call waste stock exchange. It's in order to promote the circular economy and to reduce the amount of waste sent to landfill. These are some of my concerns I had. Thank you for giving me some guidelines.
Donovan, you want to jump in on them?
Thank you.
Thank you, Valentine. Well, I think you just gave a great example, Valentine, in terms of Cameroon coming up with initiatives to create circular economies and markets around waste. Obviously, a strong set of ambitions and goals, which we can see through Cameroon's NDC, is really important because it sets the policy and regulatory environment for investing in different kinds of infrastructure, particularly around diversion, as you say, of organic waste from landfills, but also the support of business and small business opportunities through that diversion process as well. So I think that you've raised exactly the right questions and the right issues. I think one of the things that also comes through in Cameroon's NDC and more NDCs, and I think we'll see this in the third round of NDCs and the biennial transparency reports as well, is that countries are now putting investment figures against the change that they want to see and opening up discussions with multilateral development banks, with investors, with the private sector in terms of investing in that infrastructure as well. So I think it's a really positive thing to come through Cameroon's NDC as they started to put a specific figure on the change that they wanted to see. So thanks for raising that, and glad to keep talking about the work that Cameroon's doing.
Yusuf, did you want to jump in on that? No. Okay. So we're coming up on the end here. I want to. I don't think we're gonna have time for 3 more questions, but let's try to fit in at least 2 more. So Piotr and Jonathan, maybe you guys both give your questions now, and then we'll try to answer them in order.
Okay, thank you very much. My name is Piotr from the African Circular Economy Network Foundation. And I thank you, BP, because in the beginning you were emphasizing that the whole strategy is not only to look at methane, but at all different emissions. And then I heard Donovan speaking about very nice, very important strategies, starting from recycling, separate collection, reduction, and composting, black soldier flies. All those have very big potential. But then I heard from Mr. Yusuf from Iraq that one of the strategies is to simply burn waste in an incinerator, waste to energy, and even it was called a renewable energy. So I'm just a bit, my question is, what is the CCAC and UNEP stance about shifting from methane emissions to CO2 emissions and take into account or other implications of waste incineration? So air quality and also like simply going opposite direction than circular economy. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you. Before we answer that question, let's go to Jonathan real quick. We'll get both of them in.
Thank you ever so much. Good afternoon, good evening, everybody. My name's Jonathan Parkinson. I work for a small Swiss consultancy firm called Ecopsis. I was very pleased to see on the presentation from Yusuf on from Iraq, the focus on open burning and the reference to the program on roadmaps and the city pilots. We're currently doing a study for practical action focusing on financing, which is doing a scoping study of different financing instruments to tackle mismanaged waste and urban burning. So the financing is absolutely critical to achievement of the international goals. We're also doing some work for UNICEF, which focuses on greenhouse gas emissions from sanitation. And as was raised in the comment by Daniel Dibala from Stockholm, I believe. I think it's critical that there's a more focus on greenhouse gas emissions from sanitation, particularly on-site sanitation. The research and work to date shows that the emissions from on-site sanitation, particularly in areas where the groundwater levels are high, creating anaerobic conditions, are a major concern. So my question was, is there a particular interest from the coalition I was looking at your list of publications, and there isn't really much that really reflects this. It's more focused on solid waste, and the wastewater sanitation is more on the treatment. I just wondered if you were having an interest to focus more on the on-site sanitation. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. I think, yeah, Donovan,
I'll that second one, and then I'll pass to Yusuf for the first one as well from Gotcha. So, Jonathan, yeah, totally agree. I think that it is growing. Is it a growing concern, and it's something that CCAC is increasingly aware of and is likely to address more in the future. So, I think that you are quite right, and I think through the NDCs as well, we're seeing much more concern expressed from countries on sanitation and emissions. So really take that point on board, and thanks for your encouragement of working in that space. And thanks for also sharing the work that you're doing. Thank you.
Yes.
Yes, we can hear you.
You can hear me? Sorry about this is the installation. I'm talking about it. But I have this is the intervention about that. Of course, when I talking about this a new project by NIC, but of course already we this our colleague in the other department and the Ministry of Environment. We will follow up about this the details of the project. This is the project submit to EIA report to Ministry of Environment. Of course, this is any project. Especially this project, we will focus about this important issue, talking about this is the reduction of the greenhouse gases. At the same time, we focus about the air quality. Already we have the standard of the air quality. For that, we asking for this investor or this visible study focus about the high level technology and the incineration. For that, I went explain about that. This is the project included the environmental impact report, and we focus about also about the air quality, and this is the requirement or technical requirement of when it's the project. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And Daniel, apologies, but we're 4 minutes over now, so I'm gonna close the Q&A. But I see you're engaged in the chat now, so hopefully we can address your questions there. Thanks to everyone for joining this session. It's, I think, really been a fantastic set of presentations, and this isn't the end. We have one more workshop on July 11th. Jared, can you go to the next slide real quick? There's a QR code for the next workshop focusing specifically on coal mine methane. And I think this also goes back a little bit to the previous question from Jonathan. Wastewater management and coal mine methane are two places that the CCAC has relied more on our partners to work on than from within our internal secretariat. In particular, our partnership with the Global Methane Initiative. They have enormous expertise and a deep reservoir of experience and operations in those two spaces. We are doing more inside the CCAC, but we are a coalition of partners, and we do all of our work through the partners. And in those two subsectors, particularly related to methane, we have some fantastic partners that we rely on quite a bit. So there's a little bit less content, I would say, on our website on those topics for that reason. So the next workshop is focused on this coal mine methane. It will include partners from the Global Methane Initiative, in fact, speaking there, and it's on the 11th of July. I do hope very much that all of you will attend or forward this on to other colleagues who may have more of a focus in this space. Next slide. So as part of our responsibility as the Secretariat for the Global Methane Pledge, we are in the business of identifying and elevating good practice examples. If you and champion countries and partners. So if you are one of those champions, or you want to be one of those champions, you need to tell us. You need to help us identify you and elevate you. So please do share any progress you make as your countries or your organization support countries in the development of roadmap action programs, in legislation and actions that are related to methane or all of the climate and clean air business that we do in the CCAC, please reach out to us, and we will make this known to the world, elevate that within our partnership. Final slide. Here's some of our contact information. We are at your disposal. Please do not be afraid to reach out. Myself and Sophie, as I mentioned, are the co-leads of the MRAP program, but you can reach out to the broader secretariat, and we can link you with Donovan and all of the wonderful experts that we have working on our side. So thank you again for joining us for this workshop focused on the waste sector, and we hope to see you back for the coal session next month. Have a good rest of your day.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks for joining.